Okay, hello everybody. Today in the Pachad Yitzchok, we'll be continuing. Oh, yes. First of all, we would like to dedicate this learning session to the Ilui Nishama of
Mordechai Israel Tzvi
ben
Moshe Aaron.
Okay, the Nishama shall have an aliyah.
Amen.
And he should get extra nachas from our learning of the Pachad Yitzchok. Okay, so we're in Maamar Chet, and we're going to pick up in Ot Vav. Let's just pick up from here. We're talking about the two mentions in the Shabbos day davening that God should relate to our commemorating of the Shabbos with desire. Okay? So, we talked about there is a structure in Tefillah that you have the first third, the last third, and the middle. The middle, the Chazal say, is the appropriate place to request for things. Mm-hmm. The first three brachot are praises of Hashem, and the last three brachot are gratitude. Mm-hmm. Okay? It is inappropriate to ask for anything within the blessings of gratitude. Yet the blessings of gratitude, okay. So, Ayin brachot lamedal, the Gemara in Brachot says, we did this last time, I'm just going to read this briefly, that, excuse me, Amar Rav Yehuda, La'olam al yishal adam tzrachav lo b'shalosh rishonot lo b'shalosh achronot. A person should never ask for his personal requests in the Amidah prayer, not during the first three brachot and not during the last three brachot. Ela ba'amtziut, only in the middle content. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, because Rabbi Chanina said rishonot, the set of first three brachot, domat. What is that like? Le'eved, like a servant, shemisader shvach lifnei rabo. He arranges the praises before his master. Amtsayut, the ones in the middle, domeh le'eved shemavakesh pras mirabo. They are like what? Like a servant who asks for something from his master. Whether it's reward, payment, the things that he needs, that's after he arranges his praise, then he asks. Achronot, what are the last brachot, the last set? Dome le'eved shekiba pras mirabo. This is like a servant who now has received that which he requested, and v'niftar, and he's taking his leave, v'holech lo. So you're basically giving gratitude and taking leave. Okay? And right over there, v'katfu Tosfot, Tosfot says, Dibra HaMaskal al yishal. If you look, the header of that Tosfot is that a person should not ask. Pirish Rabbeinu Chanana explains, Rabbeinu Hai and Rabbeinu Hai Gon, Didafka li yachid. This is only a law concerning an individual. Aval tzarchei tzibur, when it comes to the needs of the congregation, the many, shoalen, it is appropriate to place requests for the needs of the public within the last set. It doesn't have to be exclusively in the middle. That's what Tosfos points out.
But do we have a case?
There's a reason why we're mentioning this. V'teidan, you should know, meaning, what is the case?
Yeah.
Ritzei. In a regular Shema. We'll see. V'teidan, you should know. Didafka yachid ka'amar Shaharei ikar brachot achrona tzarchei tzibur heim ad kan lashana. Okay, so Tosfos says like this: V'teda, you should know. Didafka yachid kamar. This halacha, this gemara is only referring to a yachid, an individual. Shaharei ikar brachot achrona, because the main point of the last brachos is actually tzarchei tzibur, for the needs of the congregation. That's what Tosfos says. V'adram halalu mukshim hei me'od. The Pachad Yitzchok says these words are very difficult to understand. If the last three brachot of your Amidah, if they're actually asking for needs, but the only reason why it's allowed, it's only because they are for the communal needs. So if that's true, imkain, my high the amrina begamara ala shlosha achrona tehu doima bahen le'eved shekibel pras mirabo v'nifter v'halachla. He says Tosfos' understanding flies in the face of the mashal and the Gemara, because the Gemara says first the servant, he arranges the praises, and then he asks for something, and what's the last three? Where he is thanking and taking leave. How does that have anything to do with Tosfos saying that the last three brachos are requests for the communal needs?
Right.
That's the question. Okay? Halo bakashat tzrachim, the request for needs, v'kabalat pras, and the receiving of reward, heim tarti desatri, they're two mutually exclusive ideas. How can Tosa say that what's happening in the third set of brachot is asking for communal needs, when the Gemara is describing that process as having received what you asked for and thanking your master and taking leave of him? Let's pause for a second. What are the last three brachot of the Shemona Esrei? Hamachazir Shechinato L'Tzion, Baruch Kel Ha'odot, and Hamvarech et Amo B'Shalom. Hamvarech et Amo B'Shalom can clearly be understood as a request for communal needs.
Right.
That's what it is, right?
Right. In fact, it's more that than thank.
Right. The one before that is Baruch Kel Ha'odot, right? It's that we should, right? It's basically that every single being should be aware and give praises to God because He's so worthy of praises for all these things, because He does all these wonderful things for us, right? He's there for us. What we're really doing is we're asking for all. We're saying that everybody, the whole world, should get all this stuff, okay? And that God should return His presence to Tzion, right? What's that? That God should see our tefillot and our karbanot as He should be desirous of them. We're asking Him to accept our tefillot.
Right.
So all those things are requests. Pretty much, right? I'm just thinking out loud here.
In which case, how could you argue that they're words of thanks?
That is exactly. So there's a game being played with all the brachot of Shemona Esrei that you're giving Him praise as if it's what He does, and really in doing that, what you are is you're requesting. You're saying, God, you are the healer, right? It's praise, but really what you're doing, you're saying, God, please, healing comes from you. Give me healing, right? Only you could return your Shechina to Zion. Are we asking for you or asking for us, right? What's the headspace is so fascinating in the Shemona Esrei, because you're recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, first of all, there's no difference between past, present, and future. So, for example, He is the Mechaya HaMeitim, even though we haven't experienced it, right? We're saying, right? And all this is seen, every single request that you're asking, you're really giving praise. And every praise, you're really saying, God, by identifying you as this, I'm saying, I recognize this comes from you. It's a request for manifestation of this.
Right.
Okay? So, let's see how He explains. Remember, the schism here between the Tosfot and the Gemara's Mashal is that what's happening at the last stage of your Amidah is you have received what you're asking for, you're saying thanks and leaving.
Right.
And yet Tosfot is saying this is where you're actually asking on behalf of the collective for the big things.
Right.
Okay. Zayin. Okay, are we having fun yet?
Yeah.
Okay, great. V'nashmiya bekan dvarim berurim, and we will make heard clear things. Let us explain with great clarity the first of the last three brachot of Shemona Esrei, Ritzeh. Kol hamitpalel birkat Ritzeh ba'avodat Yisrael b'tfilatam. Do we have a siddur here?
Yeah, but you don't like my siddurs.
I'm resolved to work hard to find it. How different can Ritzeh be in the Shemona Esrei? If only I can find it. Right, because I forgot this siddur, the words have words.
That's right.
Yeah, the letters have letters. You have to be on like anti-psychedelics to use this. Okay. You like that one?
There you go.
Okay. So, Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu ba'amcha Yisrael v'letfilatam she'eh. God, be desirous of your nation Israel and their regular prayers. V'hashev ha'avodah l'dvei beitecha, and return the service, the divine service, right, of the Beit HaMikdash to your home. V'ishe Yisrael tfilatam, and the sacrifices of Israel and their prayers, meheira, speedily ba'ahava, with great love, to kabel beratzon, accept with desire. U'tihil ratzon, and it should be pleasing to you, tamid avodat Yisrael amecha, always the service of your people.
That's a request.
Now, who's it a request for?
For the people.
What is it worded as? How is it worded as?
What do you mean?
It's worded as a request for God. right? We're saying, God, would you please be so happy with us? Right? We want you to be happy. Please, if only you... Let this be pleasing to you, right? We're saying, we're doing all this for you that it should be pleasing. That's what we want, right? To be motzei chen, that you should have nachas, right?
Right.
Okay. That wasn't bad. Thank you. Okay. So anybody who understands, Kol HaMitpalel, anybody who prays Birchat Ritzeh, the bracha, this bracha of Ritzeh that we just read, B'kavanah, with the intent, Shel Bakasha V'tachnunim Greda, of just a lesser request and an appeal, Harei Zeh Choreg Misidra Shel Matbea Tefillah, it steps out of the bounds of the arrangement of Tefillah, Ve'enu al Badai, and it's fake, it's phony. Meaning your intent when you say that can't be that you are asking, you're asking that God should be happy. I'm sorry, that you're asking that God should accept your tefillah. It's not in the same place, so to speak, as maybe the bracha before it, which was a straight out request. It's okay to say, God, of course you're the healer, I need healing. Right? Here you're not saying, God, please accept our prayers. Because Shalosh Achronot Einan Ela Ma'aseh Preidam Lefnei Harav. The last three, right, brachot, are the act of taking leave from before your master. Ela shebepreida metzino inyan bracha. You find that when you take leave, it is appropriate to give a blessing. Birchat hapreida, the blessing of taking leave.
Wow, so that's how you take leave, right? By giving a blessing.
Yeah. V'talmid pakach kishu nifta mirabo, and a wise, a clever student, when he leaves his master, when he takes leave of his master, umivarcho beberchat hapreda, and he blesses him with the blessing of taking leave. Harehu mitnaheg be'arma. He acts with clever conspiracy, with cleverness. He's going to try to take something. Sneaky. Un ganvit arain farzicha bracha. There's a line here in Yiddish, right? And he steals for himself a bracha.
By giving a bracha.
Yeah, you give the bracha. The protocol is, the ritual is to take leave of your master. You give him blessing, but you do it in a way that you slip in there. You work it out that you're getting a blessing too. Right? Unerganvit arain. He steals inside for himself. He takes in a stealing way inside farzich for himself a bracha, a blessing. That in place of blessing his master with all kinds of good things, he could bless him with anything. What does he bless him with? Harehu mevarech et Rabbo. He blesses his master and says V'omer, and he says, "The Rebbe zal haben nachas von mir." I'm blessing you should have a lot of nachas from me.
From me.
Yeah.
It's a sneaky way of...
yeah, but it's everybody wins because he wants to have nachas from you, and you know that the only way to have that you can give him nachas is if you, right? If you are who you are, and you have what you need. You're asking him for that, right? It's beautiful, right? It's such a clever, beautiful, right? So basically, if you want to be ganvit farzicha bracha, you have to say the Rebbe zal haben nachas von mir. Okay? And this is actually a very pleasant blessing of taking leave to the master. The master loves this, gets a big kick out of it. And this way of cleverness, of sneakery, it's also it gets a bracha for itself. And with this approach, that is the intent that you should have. It totally changes. Meaning to be Mekayim, to fulfill the Gemara. And really, the Tosfos with the halacha is that you can't ask. You're not allowed to approach that bracha and Shemona Esrei as just asking. You have to do it as actually you're blessing God. And if you do that correctly, you will receive, right? It changes your Shemona Esrei. This is very practical. The Ikra Shal Kavod, you see also, if we're Zocha, the Pachad Yitzchok, whatever he says, no matter how theoretical and out there it is, you can take it to a place of avodat alev, of really attitude, like an interpersonal, emotional approach. The ikra shel kavanah berchat ritzeh, the main intent, the essence of the intent of the blessing of ritzeh, tzricha liot berchat preda la'arav. It has to be an intended blessing of taking leave of your master. It's the beginning of your taking back 3 steps.
Mm-hmm.
However, the actual blessing of taking leave is arranged with the following style. The Rebbe soll von mir Nachat haben. The master should have nachas for me. V'zeh hevdel, and this is the contrast, bein kabel beratzon es tfilasenu ubein ritzei betfilasa. Okay, so you say 2 things. It says, please accept with desire their prayers, and saying, and also ritzei betfilatam, and be desirous of their prayers. One is accept with desire our prayers, and one is be desirous of their prayers. They're both different lines in that blessing, and on the face of it, they seem the same. Okay? This is the difference. When we say accept with desire our prayers, kabel beratzon et tfilatenu, hi tachnunim al kabbalat tefillah. That is where we're asking for God to accept our prayer. Aval ritzei betfilatam, that you should be desirous of their prayers. Hakavanehi, the intent is she'anu mevarchim ato, we're giving God a blessing, kivyachol, she'ikabel nachat mitfilatenu, that he should have he should delight in our prayers. Ava bevadai ubevadai, certainly and certainly, shenichla b'zeh bracha latzmeinu, within that there's an inferred blessing for us. V'harei zeh mamish al derech hatalmid hapikeach ha'ma'arim al rabbo, and this is literally that approach that we mentioned before of that sneaky student who is cleverly. He's being clever with his master, the Omer Lo, and he says, "The Rebbe zal von mir nachas haben," that the master should have nachas from me. V'zeh she'amar Rav Yehuda, and that's what Rav Yehuda is saying in the Gemara. Shebishlosh achronos, that with the set of the last 3 brachos, hu dome le'eved shekibo pras mirabo, it is like a servant who already received that which he requested, his reward from his master. Niftar, he takes leave, v'holech lo, and he goes on his way. Amnam, however, the fact that the fulfillment of the needs of the receiver is actually a nachat to the master, to have that kind of arrangement where the receiving of something is also gives nachat to the master, that you only have on the communal level. You don't have that on individual level. Because when it comes to the communal level, is a nachas lefan of behechlet. That's what gives him nachas. It's that, meaning it's always on the level of the general. With the fulfillment of the needs of the individual, it is not necessarily so that his receiving will be also, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepting his prayers it gives him nachat.
Why is that?
Because on the level of an individual, sometimes he needs to have charm in order to do that personally. What if he doesn't do that with charm, or he has, there's something between him and God, there's a little bit of chutzpah, but none of that is present by the tzibur. That's why it's good to daven with the tzibur, because you can get personally benefits while being free from any of that kind of scrutiny. Okay? אבל במילוי צרכיו של היחד אין דבר זה מוחלט. ומאחר דבקשת מילוי צרכיו של יחד, אין כאן ההחלטה של נחס רוח פון רבן. And since the request for the fulfillment of personal needs for an individual, there is no certain connection, there's no certain cause for a nachas ruach by the master. Shuv ein zeh ela bakasha greda. Therefore, it's only just a personal request. V'kan lo yeaseh b'gim achronot, and therefore he cannot do that. That is inappropriate in the last 3 brachot. Okay, he's explained that Gemara in the Tosas beautifully, and through that he's explained how on a regular Shemona Esrei, when we say Ritzei, we're really taking leave of Hashem, and we're sneaking in there, right? We're being charming.
So how do we do that when we're praying on our own? How do we fulfill that?
Well, that meaning the point is that when you're davening alone, the blessing is still the blessing, the last 3rd blessing. You're not asking for personal; you're asking on behalf of the tzibur.
Right.
Okay, but we still have to take this back to the Shachris Shabbos. We're creating all this we're creating this idea in order to now, we're going to go back and explain the two different ritzes that we have by Shabbos davening. Okay? V'hu hadin v'hi hamida. B'vakashas ritzei b'mnucha seinu tefillah Shabbos. This is the same thing in regards to our davening on Shabbos Shachris, where we say, on the one hand, we say ritzei b'mnucha seinu, that Hashem should desire for our rest, right? Our being resting on Shabbos, and we say v'hanchilenu Hashem Elokeinu b'ahava uveratzon Shabbos kadshecha, and God should, with love and desire, He should bestow upon us the sanctity of His Shabbos. So both of those, where it's an appeal that God should relate to our Shabbos with desire, right?
But one of them is in the middle, and one of them is in the...
They're both in the same bracha.
The
The placement, that's not relevant here. Yeah, but that's a request. Yeah. Both those mentions are in one bracha, and that's not in the last three brachas. That's in the middle. It's just a personal request.
Right.
But you should know, on Shabbos we don't do personal requests.
Right.
So the whole content in the middle of Shabbos Yom Tov is really just about the significance of the day and our connection to the day, whatever the Kedusha is. And here we're saying that in vis-a-vis that Shabbos, we're asking that our relationship with Shabbos should be that we share it with you, that there is desire on your side of our keeping it and commemorating it, right? And we mentioned why is there two mentions? It seems redundant. And also one of them is general and the other is specific. The first one is that God should be desirous specifically of our rest, meaning that which we abstain from. And the second one is the whole sanctity of Shabbos. So now let's come back and try to address that. Okay? When it comes to the forces of pleasure and desire, when it comes to desire, that is, it functions under the law of kemayim panim al panim. Kemayim panim al panim is a quote from Tanakh, and it means like the waters of a face to a face. And it means that there's mutuality in existence. That means that you receive the way you project. And if somebody doesn't like you, it's because you don't like him. And the more you are, you have a love and desire and you relate to them that way, then it's reflected. Meaning it doesn't matter which side it starts from, there's always a mutuality. There is a movement towards taking on that kind of equation, and therefore everything in relationships is a reflection of desire, to the degree that there is the desire. So always, obviously, if you're asking, you're appealing in a relationship that one should be desirous of, you're saying that you're doing this out of desire. You're saying that the standard of our relationship, the give and take, should be on that level, right? And of course, implying that is the mutuality. So when you're asking for God to be desirous, you're also putting in also for yourself a request that, right? I mean, it's reflective and inflective. So to say that God should be desirous of our rest, it's also a blessing for ourselves. We're asking that God, may our Shabbos commemoration be with a desire, right? We want this. We desire that it should be on the level of desire too. And let's bring everything back from the end back to the beginning. In the beginning of this essay, it was difficult for us to understand this request in the Amida of the Shabbos day prayer, that God should be desirous of our rest on Shabbos. Like it was written there, still, we still don't understand. It's not been satisfactory yet. Ki mahi hamashmaut shel yichud haratzon lemnuchata shel Shabbos yosem asher lekol yosem yana shel Shabbos. Why is the element of menucha, of resting on Shabbos, why should we single that out for the attention of desire? Why are we saying that God should be desirous specifically of that? V'lo od, and not only that, but ella sheyichud haratzon lemnuchata shel Shabbos, by uniquely associating desire and rest on Shabbos, megia ad kedei kach shenishnata habakasha al ratzon bekiflayim, that in the it changes the request regarding ratzon twice, meaning it doesn't, the blessing didn't stop there, but then we go back to it and we mention desire again. B'shniya, and the second time, biyachas l'klaliyuta shel Shabbos. In the second mention of an appeal for God's desire, it's on the general of Shabbos and not just on this aspect of Menucha. Right? We say v'anchilenu b'ratzon Shabbos. And yet, the first one was related specifically to this element of Menucha. So what's the contrast, right? One is Ritzei b'Menuchateinu, and the other is V'anchilenu b'Ratzon Shabbos Kadshecha. So one is the Menucha, and the other one is general Shabbos. Why do we single out Menucha in terms of Ritzei, and what is the of Ratzon, and why in general are we making an appeal to Ratzon? So Amnam, however, mitoch ma shelamadnu b'Maamar zeh, through that which we learned in this essay, amadnu al tiva shel hadgasha hamavlita et yichud haratzon lahamenucha dafka. De Ratzon zeh kolelu et ha'oneg v'haratzon shel hatzmeinu, because the aspect of Menucha is actually includes within when you talk about Shabbos, and you say, God, please give us Shabbos in a desirous way. Be desirous of our connection to Shabbos. There's nothing necessarily implied in that has any bearing on you. But when you say, God, please accept our rest, right, our menucha with desire, that means that you're also putting the element of your own personal menucha in there. So you're asking for success in your menucha too. Meaning the menucha of Shabbos, the peace and the rest of Shabbos that allows for manifestation of oneg and all those heightened pleasures that are supposed to be manifest in Shabbos are they're implicit in our menucha. When you say menuchatenu, our rest, that we should be at rest. So when you're saying, God, be desirous of our rest, an element of there is our rest. So we're asking that Hashem also, meaning that we're asking for our rest. Whereas when we say, Hashem, bestow upon us Shabbos, Kadshecha, the sanctity of Shabbos, there's nothing in that for us, necessarily nothing from our side that we're mentioning there. So there's no appeal for a bracha on our side. He's saying that the two mentions, the first mention is the secret request that we would be asking for when actually asking for God that He should have something. We're also asking for ourselves for something. That's specifically in regards to the reference of Menucha. Whereas when we just talk about generally on Shabbos, that part is just for God, so to speak, and doesn't have necessarily any sort of implied reference to our share.
Why not, if Menucha is a way to get oneg, why not just ask for oneg straight away?
Because that's too obvious that we're asking for. Meaning, first of all, there's no guarantee that we're going to have oneg. So say, God, please be desirous of our oneg. Why would God be desirous of our oneg? Oneg is a function of when God is desirous of us.
Right. Why would He be desirous of our rest? The same thing.
Because He wants us not to. So when you say menucha, you're referencing your keeping of Shabbos also. Meaning, on one level, you're saying, God, be desirous of the fact that we're keeping Shabbos. We're abstaining from the things we're meant to abstain from. But in that word menucha, it's also all those spiritual and emotional benefits that we have from menucha is also implied in there. Right. Things like oneg. So you're saying, hey, God, let's get to a situation where I'm having a lot of oneg and you're happy about it. Right? But it's couched in the terms of like, oh, God, please be desirous of our avoda to you of Shabbos. Right? Whereas the second one doesn't have any of that element mentioned in it. So that's meaning that's where we sneak in. The Pachad Yitzchok is saying that's where we sneak in a little bracha for ourselves too.
That's with regards to Ritzei. What about the other two blessings at the end?
No. We learned from Ritzei. There's a bracha of Ritzei in every Shemona Esrei. That's the first to the last three. What we're talking about now is in Shachris. It's the two mentions of Ritzei in the content of Shabbos, the davening of Shachris. Okay, meaning Ritzei, the Menucha of Shabbos. Ritzei b'Shabbos Shabbos Kadshecha. Okay? Okay. Ve'oneg zeh, and this pleasure, po'al hu b'yichud al menuchato haShabbat. This is active specifically on this dimension of rest on Shabbos. Da'af al pi da menucha inyan shel sheva al tasi. Even though when we say menucha, things at rest are not things in motion. It's referring to the Sheva al Taseh, to sit and not do, meaning the negative prohibitions. Mikol Makom. Nevertheless, since in Shabbos, Zachar and Shamar are together, and even when we talk about the Losases, we're talking about the Ases, even when we tell Hashem that we're asking Him that which we abstain from should be desirous to Him, in that which we abstain from is also all the positive things, right? That's that also element that we discussed over the course of the essay, that all the negatives are all the positives, and all the fear is all the love when it comes to Shabbos. So even when we talk about menucha, of rest, of what we're abstaining from, we're also talking about all the positive aspects and all the positive, right? Okay, so the Sheva al Taseh, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, Ayidei Onig V'Ratzon Anu Omen D'Rachmana Achashve Lahana Ma'aseh. We're saying that there should be, right, that through, since whenever there's oneg, like we found by the illicit sexual relationships, that you can have pleasure that is on the level of maisa, even though it's not an action, right? How could you bring a karban chatas for doing something by accident when there's no maisa? Only in the case where the Torah tells you have to bring, right, a karban chatas if a person engages in one of the arayot, one of the illicit, right, sexual relationships by accident. You can bring a karban. Why do you bring a karban on something that it's not considered an action? Because there is pleasure there. We talked about the connection of pleasure, right? So here we're saying that oneg, right? We're saying even that which we abstain from in menucha, right? But there's the love and the levels of oneg in the fear and in that which we abstain from of the prohibitions, right? So we're saying that the pleasure that we have should be considered a maisa tasha, like we're doing. That we should have, right? Our pleasure should be considered an act for God, right? So, D'Rachmana Achashve, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should consider the hana an actual maasa, an action, the pleasure in action. Vayidei kach, and through this, mufkati hamenucha de Shabbos mikol sharishus hashev al taseh de kol Torah. And therefore, menucha is something unique, menucha on Shabbos, which takes it out from this whole domain of this general a category of sheva al taseh, of the rest of the Torah. Meaning, the rest of the Torah, you have positives and you have negatives, and they're discrete. And yet, here in Shabbos, when you have a menucha, you're not doing something. And yet, right, there's this element of normally in the prohibitions, you're engaging in God through yira, through fear.
Right.
And through the positive commandments, you're engaging in love. But here, even on Shabbos, it's possible that, right, in the enactments of the prohibitions, or not doing them, we're also not just fear, but also love. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that brings an oneg, and that oneg is a maisa. So even in the negatives are all reflecting all the positives, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? So this aspect of Menucha on Shabbos is different than all the other normal, under the general category of the prohibitions that you don't do, right, the way their nature is in the Torah. The hashmira, and the guarding, meaning the abstaining. Na'amerti, right? You have to be Zachar Shabbos Akasha, remember the Shabbos to keep it holy, and Shamar, right? Right? To the things that the positive commandments and the negative commandments. So the Shmira, the negative commandments, Na'amerti b'dibur echad, it was said in one mention, im hazachira, with the positive. And nolad lanu bikan, and what's born out for us here, hachidush hamufla, this tremendous novel understanding, kigam isurei shel haShabbat, even the prohibitions of Shabbos, b'mivchan ahava hem nivchanim, they are considered, or they are part of this. They have this aspect of love, so that even when you mention to God, it's appropriate to talk about the prohibitions that you're keeping, meaning the rest, the things you're abstaining from, is a portal to an access to all the positive things that you're appealing to God for. And those are the two mentions and the deeper explanation. And there you have it. That's the essay. There's just one more line which consists of two words, which is just the quote from the prayer. Ritzei b'mnuchasenu. He ends with the prayer that God should indeed be desirous of where we curb ourselves and what we don't do. And implied in that is a prayer for us, that in where we curb and what we don't do, we should also have ahava, not just here. And we should be zocha to have this in our personal lives in general, and specifically on Shabbos. Amen. And don't forget that when you have your next Amidah, that the last three brachot, you're thanking God for that which you've received, and you're taking leave of Him, but you're really asking for the needs of the public.
Of the public. Very good. Chazak u'baruch. I wanted just to ask you to respond to this question.
How come that in Hebrew, serpent and nachas sound so familiar? Is there a connection? Okay, so nun and chet together means to rest. Nach, not to move. Menucha. That's the shorish of the word menucha. Nach, noach, means to rest. Also can be pleasant, reach nichoch, but right, it means to rest. Yeah. Taf makes it like a noun, nachat, meaning nachat ruach, I believe is related to rest. Nachash, serpent, is a completely different word. It has a shin, not a taf. But there may be a similarity between the aspect, maybe they do share an aspect of things at rest. I don't know. But if you're interested, I would suggest that you should read up on the root of Hebrew words. There's a whole discussion whether roots are 2 letters or 3 letters, if you can have 2-letter shorashim or 3-letter shorashim, and I would suggest that you get your hands on the Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch etymological dictionary, where it's culled from his extensive. He does beautiful explanations mostly in Tehillim, I believe, where he makes all these kinds of. He shows the shorashim, what they mean, all kinds of connections etymologically, and I would encourage you to pursue that. On the face of it, I don't think ostensibly there's any sort of connection between nachat and nachash, but you can check it out over there. They do share the nun chet, and that may be a shoresh, and it may have to do with rest. I don't know. It's the best I could do. Okay.
Thank you. Shkoyach.